Did you know that some of the most talented boxers in history lost everything in just a few seconds? From Mike Tyson biting Evander Holyfield's ear to Ike Ibeabuchi throwing away his heavyweight dreams, here are some boxing legends who ruined their careers in seconds. 1. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was not only a boxer, he was a phenomenon. He was the youngest heavyweight champion in history, having won the title at the age of 20. With his phenomenal speed, power, and aggression, Tyson was a knockout artist who appeared unstoppable in the ring. But on June 28, 1997, in one of the most notorious moments in sports annals, Tyson did something that shocked the world. In his rematch against Evander Holyfield, Tyson, enraged and upset after having been headbutted early in the fight, bit off a piece of Holyfield's ear. Yes, you read correctly. He bit his opponent's ear. The situation was complete chaos. Holyfield jumped with pain, and the fight was immediately halted by the referee. Tyson was disqualified, he had to pay $3 million, and his boxing license was revoked. The encounter transformed him overnight, from a dreading champion into a debatable personality. While Tyson did return to boxing, his reputation never quite regained its former stature. He became the baddest man on the planet, no more, but rather a fighter infamous for one of the wildest meltdowns in boxing history. 2. Andrew Golota. Andrew Golota was a gifted heavyweight boxer with the ability to be a champion. But he had a self-destructive habit. He simply couldn't keep his punches up. In 1996, Golota fought ex-heavyweight champion Riddick Bowe in what was meant to be his coming-out party. He was dominating the bout, unboxing Bowe and appearing to be a future champion. But then he did the unthinkable. He kept punching Bowe in the groins. The referee warned him several times, but Golota wouldn't cease. Eventually, in the 7th round, after yet another egregious low blow, he was disqualified. And that was it. He tossed away a fight he was dominating. And if that wasn't bad enough, in the rematch against Bowe, he did the same thing. He dominated the fight for most of the time, but continued throwing low blows and was disqualified once again. Fans and pundits were perplexed. Golota possessed all the talent to be great, but his failure to keep himself in check in the ring ended his career. Rather than being remembered as a heavyweight champion, Golota was remembered as the man who defeated himself. 3. Luis Resto. Luis Resto's story is among the saddest and most shameful in boxing history. He wasn't merely a fighter who made a poor choice. He was involved in one of the greatest sports scandals ever. Resto fought Billy Collins Jr. in 1983, an undefeated up-and-comer. Collins was supposed to win, but something was wrong during the bout. Resto's punches looked stronger than normal, and Collins' face swelled up into a mess. Following the battle, Collins's father and trainer shook hands with Resto, and right away he sensed something odd. Resto's gloves were thinner than usual. Officials, upon inspection, found that Resto's trainer had cut out the padding from his gloves, making them into weapons that did much more damage than a standard punch should. The aftermath was disastrous. Resto was permanently banned from boxing, his trainer was sent to prison, and worst of all, Collins never competed again because of the injuries he sustained. 1 year later, Collins was killed in a car accident, and many figured it was caused by the physical and emotional strain of that ill-fated bout. Resto transitioned from a good brawler to the most despised man in boxing due to a single cheating scandal. 4. Oliver McCall. Oliver McCall was not a normal boxer. He was the fighter who gave Lennox Lewis his very first professional defeat, stopping him in 1994 and stunning the globe. McCall possessed a stone-like chin, respectable punching strength, and the capability to rival the best of them. Instead of being heralded as an all-time great champion, though, he gained notoriety for one of the most bizarre moments in boxing history. In 1997, McCall received a rematch against Lennox Lewis. This was his chance to prove his first win was not a fluke. Fans were excited, expecting another war between two heavyweight giants. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Right from the first round, McCall seemed different, distracted, far off, and near disinterested in the fight. Then, during the third round, something unthinkable occurred. McCall ceased landing punches. He refused to fight back and began to stroll around the ring at random. During the fourth round, he started weeping. Yes, weeping, mid-fight. The referee was left with no option but to halt the fight and give the win to Lewis. The world of boxing was stunned. A pro boxer crying in the middle of a title fight? It was unthinkable. Following the battle, it emerged that McCall was fighting very serious personal problems, such as drug dependency and mental illness. Although he later returned to the sport of boxing, his career never quite came back to normal. Rather than being remembered as a talented boxer, he was the man who completely lost his mind in the ring. 5. James Butler. James Butler, the Harlem Hammer, was a promising boxer. He was powerful, talented, and possessed knockout ability. But one bad choice made him go from being a star on the rise to becoming one of boxing's most reviled figures. On November 23, 2001, Butler boxed Richard Grant in a celebrity boxing match to raise funds for the victims of 9/11. It was intended to be a night of friendship and sportsmanship. Grant won the bout on points, and in the tradition of boxing, went to greet Butler and offer him respect. But Butler didn't handle the loss graciously. Rather than shake hands, he did something unbelievable. He delivered a bare-knuckle sucker punch directly to Grant's face. It was a vicious, unanticipated blow that dropped Grant to the canvas, bleeding and utterly dazed. The arena was thrown into pandemonium. Security intervened, and Butler was arrested on the spot for assault. That single punch ended his boxing career in an instant. He was banned from the sport and became notorious for one of the worst examples of unsportsmanlike behavior in the history of boxing. Butler's problems didn't stop there, unfortunately. Years later, he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. 6. Ricardo Mayorga. Ricardo Mayorga was among the sport's most compelling fighters. He was not a fighter alone, a showman, trash talker, and maniacal personality inside and out of the ring. He got into the public consciousness for his crazed fight style, ability to absorb punch after punch with impunity, and booming, uncensored personality. Mayorga won championships in several weight divisions, and his fights were a must-see. He lit up cigarettes at press conferences, belittled his opponents in the most profane terms, and fought with anyone who challenged him. But as much fun as he was to watch, his irresponsible actions finally caught up with him. Outside the ring, Mayorga had an uncontrolled life. He drank too much, found himself in endless legal problems, and had problems with drugs. Rather than putting his mind on training and being disciplined, he allowed his private life to destroy his career. Consequently, his performance in the ring began to dwindle. His previously dazzling toughness couldn't stop him from being toppled by younger, dedicated boxers. He suffered harsh defeats at the hands of top-class fighters such as Oscar de la Hoya, Miguel Cotto, and Shane Mosley. Rather than retiring on a high note, he became a stepping stone for rising stars, fighting just for the purse. 7. Antonio Margarito. Antonio Margarito was a gritty, pressure-pushing fighter who achieved world champion status by outlasting and overpowering the opposition. Fans adored his relentless attack, and he accumulated some great victories throughout his career. But in 2009, his credibility was shattered in a matter of seconds. Prior to his bout with Shane Mosley, Mosley's trainer Nazim Richardson saw something suspicious as Margarito was having his hands wrapped. An inspection upon closer observation revealed that Margarito's hand wraps had been loaded illegally with a substance similar to plaster. This is such that once Margarito's hands become sweaty, the wraps would harden like cement, making his fists lethal weapons. The revelation was shocking. Had Richardson not detected it, Margarito might have seriously hurt Mosley with illegal hand wraps. Instead, the bout continued without the loaded gloves, and Mosley dominated Margarito, knocking him out in the 9th round. Following the bout, Margarito was suspended from boxing for a year. His career never recovered. Although he did get back into the ring later on, fans and boxers never trusted him again. He transformed from a respected champion to a tarnished cheater overnight. 8. Billy Collins Jr. Billy Collins Jr. was the shining star of boxing. He had it all: his perfect record, his bright future, and his aspiration to become a world champion. But one bout ruined everything, and not for anything he did. In 1983, Collins battled Luis Resto in what should have been another move toward greatness. But something wasn't right. Resto's punches were uncharacteristically strong, and Collins's face was swollen out of recognition at the end of the bout. He was severely injured around the eyes, which would cost him his boxing career. It wasn't until later, after the bout, that the horrifying truth emerged. Resto's gloves had been secretly altered. His trainer, Panama Lewis, had taken out the padding, so Resto's punches were much more devastating than they normally would have been. Collins' father, also his trainer, shook hands with Resto after the fight and immediately knew that something was amiss. Officials searched into it, and the truth was revealed. Resto and Lewis were both disqualified from boxing, but the damage had already been inflicted. Collins, heartbroken over the loss of his career, became depressed. Less than a year later, he was assassinated in a car accident, with many assuming it was suicide. 9. Panama Lewis. Panama Lewis was a renowned boxing trainer once. He trained numerous fighters and was known to deliver results. But since the Billy Collins Jr. scandal, his name is synonymous with cheating and shame. When Collins' battle with Resto was under investigation, other horrid details surfaced. Not only had Lewis stripped the padding from Resto's gloves, but there were also allegations that he had provided his fighters with illegal drugs to enhance their performance. The most notorious story surrounds a bout where Lewis was overheard instructing a fighter, "Give me the bottle, the one I mixed." To this very day, nobody knows what was actually in the bottle. For his part in the scandal, Lewis was banned for life from boxing. He was one of the few trainers to be given a lifetime ban, and his career ended in shame. 10. Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston was among the most intimidating heavyweight champions in the history of boxing. His crushing punches and intimidating figures made him a legend. However, his career changed in an odd way in 1965 when he took on Muhammad Ali in a highly expected rematch. The battle was over in less than a round. Liston fell from a punch that most thought was not powerful enough to knock him out. The punch, now referred to as the Phantom Punch, was so quick that most didn't even realize it had hit him. Rather than rising to his feet, Liston remained down, and the bout was finished in a matter of seconds. Fans and boxing insiders immediately suspected foul play. Some felt Liston had intentionally thrown the fight, perhaps because of mafia pressure, who supposedly had a hold on him. Others felt he was just afraid of Ali, who had beaten him in their last encounter. Whatever the truth may have been, Liston's career was never the same. His reputation suffered a huge blow, and fans no longer regarded him as the invincible force that he once was. He went on to fight for a few more years, but never again achieved his former status. In 1970, he was discovered dead under mysterious conditions, and yet another intrigue was added to his already troubled career. 11. Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe was among the top heavyweights of the 1990s. He possessed great strength, had great skill, and enjoyed a granite chin. In 1992, he defeated Evander Holyfield in a great battle to become the undisputed heavyweight champion. The world was in his hand. But then, in a strange instance, he did something that tainted his image forever. Bowe also had an obligation to fight Lennox Lewis, a burgeoning superstar at the moment. Boxing had never been hotter, two dominant heavyweights slugging it out in a title fight for hegemony. Yet, Bo wouldn't participate. Rather than engage Lewis for the WBC crown, Bo performed one of the greatest con jobs in pugilism. During a 1992 press conference, Bo took his place in front of reporters and tossed his WBC championship belt into a trash can. Yes, you read that correctly. He actually threw away his title to not fight Lewis. The move was meant to be an act of dominance, demonstrating that he didn't require the WBC title, but instead it made him appear as though he was avoiding the greatest challenge of his career. Ever since then, Bo was never seen the same. Though he kept fighting, his career began to decline, and he never received the respect he used to get. 12. Gerald McClellan. Gerald McClellan was among the most feared punchers in boxing in the early 1990s. The G-Man had intimidating knockout power and was famous for finishing fights in the early rounds. He became a two-time middleweight world champion and seemed destined for greatness. But on one fateful night, his whole career and life were forever altered. In 1995, McClellan also fought British fighter Nigel Benn in a super middleweight bout that would go on to be one of the most vicious fights in the history of the sport. Both fighters came out firing immediately from the bell, trading hard shots with each other. McClellan knocked Benn out of the ring during the early part of the bout, but Benn rose to his feet and continued fighting like a warrior. But then, something wasn't right with McClellan. He was blinking frantically, was in obvious distress, and could hardly get any air into his lungs. Yet he persevered, and in the 10th round, Benn hit a combination, hard, and McClellan just collapsed on one knee and did not rise. The audience stood still. Something was dreadfully amiss. McClellan was taken to the hospital, where physicians found that he had a serious brain injury. He lapsed into a coma, and while surviving, was left permanently handicapped, blind, almost deaf, and unable to walk on his own. 13. Paul Spadafora. Paul Spadafora was a phenomenal boxer with a spotless record and smooth defensive style. He became a world champion and was compared to being among the greatest lightweights of all time. Most people felt he had the potential to be considered one of the all-time greats. But rather than making history in the boxing ring, he made headlines for the wrong reasons. Spadafora had a background of legal issues, but the event that destroyed his career occurred in 2003. Following a fight with his girlfriend, he drew a gun and shot her in the abdomen. It was a brutal act of violence that left her critically wounded and landed Spadafora in prison. Even though he was finally let out and attempted to return to boxing, his career never fully recovered. The promising champion became more renowned for his criminal activity than his abilities in the ring. Fans and promoters lost enthusiasm, and instead of being celebrated as one of the greatest lightweights of his era, he became a reminder of lost talent. 14. Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner was the next Floyd Mayweather in waiting. He possessed everything: speed, power, charisma, and a flamboyant personality that catapulted him into stardom. At his best, he was a 4-division world champion, and it was expected of him that he would rule boxing for many years. However, rather than honing his skills, Broner gained more fame from his exploits outside the ring. Broner enjoyed living it up. He showed off his money, uploaded crazy videos to social media, and was always getting himself into trouble. Rather than train like a dedicated champion, he was usually out partying and drinking. The lack of commitment manifested in the ring. His performances were sloppy, and he began losing battles that he should have been winning. But his actual fall came due to his legal issues. Broner has been arrested numerous times on charges of assault, robbery, and other crimes over the years. These troubles kept him out of the ring and destroyed his image. Instead of being a remembered all-time great, he is now an example of squandered potential. Although he still boxes on occasion, Broner is no longer seriously regarded as an elite fighter. His career was reduced from promising to disappointing simply because he could not remain focused and disciplined. 15. Tyson Fury. Whereas most combatants on this list destroyed their careers, but not entirely, Tyson Fury came very close to doing so. His life has been a tale of self-destruction, turmoil, and redemption. Tyson Fury shocked the world in 2015 by beating Vladimir Klitschko to claim the heavyweight title. That was to be the start of a one-man rule, but things took a different turn for Fury's life. Once he won the biggest battle of his career, Fury began to have mental health problems, was using drugs, and was an alcoholic. He weighed over 100 pounds more, quit training, and showed no interest in boxing anymore. Instead of coming in to defend his belts, he was out partying and in the news for all the negative reasons. He even tested positive for cocaine at one time and was suspended from boxing. During interviews, Fury had confessed to being suicidal and very depressed. He felt useless after achieving the peak and almost lost everything. He had his boxing license taken away, and everybody thought he would never get back into the ring. But Fury's tale did not end there. In 2018, he staged one of the most iconic comebacks in the history of boxing. He lost weight, regained his shape, and stepped back into the ring. Since then, he has reestablished himself as one of the world's best heavyweights. Fury's career nearly came to an end in seconds due to his personal issues. But unlike others on this list, he battled back and redeemed himself. 16. Floyd Mayweather Jr. When one hears the name Mayweather, the first person that comes to mind is Floyd Mayweather Jr., the undefeated boxing great. But prior to Floyd Jr. Quo's fame, his father, Floyd Mayweather Sr., was a great boxer himself. Sadly, his career was cut short, not due to a poor fight, but due to a life of crime. Mayweather Sr. was himself a good fighter in the 1970s, fighting as a welterweight. He wasn't flashy like his son, but he possessed good skills and could have made it big. But rather than pursue boxing, he became a drug trafficker. Mayweather Sr. was arrested in the early 1990s and sentenced to 5 years behind bars for illegal drug activity. That prison stay eliminated any possible career as a successful boxer. Though he became a well-esteemed coach, instructing his son Floyd Jr. in defensive moves that rendered him great, his own profession never achieved all that it possibly could have achieved. In contrast to his son, who was one of the wealthiest and most successful fighters in history, Mayweather Sr. is forever going to be remembered as a fighter who had the potential to be great, but chose wrongly. 17. Trevor Berbick. Trevor Berbick is probably most famous for being the last man to ever fight Muhammad Ali and the first high-profile fighter to ever lose to upstart Mike Tyson. But his life and career ended in tragedy, plagued by legal issues and personal scandals. Berbick was a highly skilled Jamaican heavyweight. In 1986, he became world champion after winning a bout with Pinklon Thomas and was looking to be an upper-tier figure in the division. And then came that fateful fight that would change his destiny forever. In 1986, then 20-year-old Mike Tyson annihilated Berbick in 2 rounds to become the youngest heavyweight champion ever. That bout wasn't merely a defeat, it was a beating. Berbick could barely remain upright, stumbling about the ring in now-famous fashion. Although losing to Tyson was no shame, it signaled the start of Berbick's downfall. Then Berbick's career went into a downward spiral. He began losing bouts, and worse still, his private life was in shambles. He was arrested several times for various charges from assault to fraud. His troubles with the law mounted, and he was even deported from the United States. By the end of the 1990s, Berbick was a relic in the world of boxing, and things only kept getting worse for him. Then, in 2006, they took another turn for the worse. Berbick was killed in Jamaica, shot by his own nephew in a dispute over land. It was a tragic and shocking fate for a man who had faced the best boxers in the history of the sport. Rather than being known for his talent, Berbick's legacy is largely remembered for his defeat at the hands of Tyson and his personal issues. He was capable of more, but what he did away from the ring destroyed his career. 18. Benny "Kid" Parrott. Some boxers ruin their careers due to poor decisions. Others, such as Benny "Kid" Parrott, lose their lives. His heartbreaking tale altered the sport forever. Parrott was a skilled Cuban welterweight during the 1950s and early 1960s. He was tough and could take a punch. He was a world champion and ranked as one of the top fighters in his weight class. But his life was cut short in a bout against Emil Griffith in 1962. Parrott and Griffith had previously fought twice. Theirs was a personal feud, and prior to their third bout, Parrott taunted Griffith's sexuality, calling him an insult at the weigh-in. Enraged by the jest, Griffith entered the fight with a renewed purpose. The battle was on March 24, 1962, at Madison Square Garden. Parrott was receiving serious punishment for most of the bout, but would not quit. Then, in round 12, Griffith delivered a series of vicious punches that had Parrott pinned against the ropes with no defense. Griffith continued to punch away, over 20 unanswered blows in a matter of seconds. The referee responded too slowly. By the time he intervened, the fight was already finished. Parrott collapsed to the canvas, out cold. He had incurred massive brain damage and lapsed into a coma. He never regained consciousness. 10 days afterward, Benny Parrott expired, one of boxing's greatest tragedies. The world was shocked, and the officials of boxing were compelled to reconsider safety protocols. 19. Francisco Bojado. Francisco "Panchito" Bojado was to be the next boxing sensation. When he went pro in 2001, he was only 18 years old, but already had a massive following. He possessed a ferocious style, knockout ability, and a showy personality that led people to liken him to legends such as Oscar de la Hoya. Many thought he would reign supreme in boxing for years to come. For some time, it seemed as though Bojado was living up to his promise. He won his first 9 bouts, the majority of them by knockout, and everyone was enthused about his prospects. But then it all fell apart. The issue is lack of discipline. Rather than training and honing his craft, Bojado got careless and complacent. He wasn't working hard enough to remain on top. His conditioning declined, and he began losing to fighters that he ought to have beaten handily. In 2003, he suffered his first major loss against Juan Carlos Rubio, a fighter he was supposed to beat. His defeat laid bare his weaknesses. He wasn't as well-rounded as everyone assumed. For the next few years, he kept fighting, but never really improved. His training routines worsened, and he lost his interest in the sport. Before he was even 24 years old, Bojado's career had already crumbled. He tried a comeback in 2007, but was no longer the same fighter. He lost to Steve Forbes and went missing from boxing shortly afterward. 20. Ike Ibeabuchi. Ike Ibeabuchi was poised to be the next heavyweight champion to dominate. He had it all: power, speed, and an unbeaten record. Most thought he was a future champion, maybe the man to face greats like Lennox Lewis. But rather than becoming a legend, he ruined his career with legal issues. Ibeabuchi's most famous fight was against David Tua in 1997, where he won a brutal 12-round war. That fight set a record for the most punches thrown in a heavyweight fight and proved that Ibeabuchi was a serious contender. He followed that up with a knockout win over undefeated Chris Bird, showing that he had the skills to be a world champion. But just as his professional life was soaring to new heights, his personal life went out of control. Ibeabuchi had a violent past life outside the ring. He was involved in some horrific incidents, such as kidnapping his former girlfriend's son and crashing his car into a concrete pillar at top speed. His mental state was questioned, and his behavior became increasingly erratic. Then there was the incident that derailed his career for life. In 1999, Ibeabuchi was arrested for having sexually assaulted a woman at a Las Vegas hotel. He was given a prison term of more than a decade, and his boxing career was finished like that. By the time he was let out, it was too late. He tried to make a comeback, but was never the same. Ibeabuchi could have been one of the greatest heavyweights of his time, but his actions outside the ring destroyed everything.